Eric McCool here of Permagora.com. I'm here today with Chris Hardy, a local farmer here in Jackson County, and a buddy of mine. We met back in a permaculture class about 6 years ago now, and we're going to talk a little bit today about permaculture and farming and some of the issues that we face in those areas. So, Chris, would you go ahead and tell me about your background and how you got interested in farming?
Well, my granddad was a farmer back in Iowa, and so as a youth I would travel there in the summers and give my grandfather and grandmother a hand on the farm.
Nice.
And yeah, that was many years ago, and just been involved in local food and farm and agriculture pretty much since. Just yeah, it's just
lifelong thing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Now, you've been growing vegetables as well as seed crops, and I've been getting a little more in tune with the whole idea of the importance of seeds and seed crops. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of maintaining a local seed stock and some of the challenges inherent to this?
So the challenges inherent are typically like something like when you don't know if genetically engineered or patented seeds could get into the system, and so like the work we've done here in Southern Oregon, we ban genetically engineered crops to be able to protect our farmers and gardeners and people who believe in local food sovereignty from the threats of just being contaminated by patented seeds and having the Monsanto police walking around on your farm. The other challenges are, of course, the education, are just the awareness of what it takes to be able to isolate your seed crops, to keep them pure, to know that what you're planting is the seeds saved off of that seed are going to be true to type. And so that takes a little bit of experience and awareness and education, awareness of what your neighbor's doing and what they're growing, and of course that brings in other conversations of how you can work together to one neighbor grow this type of brassica and this neighbor grow the other type of brassica that is not of the same type of brassica that would cross-pollinate.
I see. So as I understand it, you can't just grow all your seeds together. You have to make sure that varieties that might cross-pollinate have to be separated by a certain distance.
Exactly. And so that allows one every year to be able to grow something different. If you have a neighbor nearby, you can collaborate on that. And also it would allow you, if you were just out solo on your in your garden or on your farm, to be able to grow one variety one year. Next year you'd grow a similar species, but you would grow a different variety, so that you had the to have the types of seeds that you would like represented, the types of vegetables and plants and that you would like to have represented on your farm.
Yeah. So it seems like it's complex in that you have to have rotation, you have to have separation, and it really implies to me, beyond just being able to grow your own seeds to save them for yourself, you have to have some sort of community collaboration. You have to work together with others in the area, unless of course you have just a huge tract of land and access to all these different areas. But I guess community organization and community cooperation is a big part of local food sovereignty, it seems like.
Absolute.
Yeah.
This expands the potential for what is possible when you start having these conversations, because you can only do so much on your own operation. And there's a lot of different layers of like growing quality seed, such as trialing and working with the seed that you are passionate about, to improve it, adapt it, grow it for reasons of drought tolerance or low inputs or other things, or improved nutrition, other things that would really benefit you, to work with others to be able to expand what is possible.
Right. So you talked about the Jackson County GMO ban, and for those of you who don't know, we're in a county which is one of the first, if I'm correct on that, I'm not sure, but one of the first counties to ban GMOs from being grown in the county at a county level. And Chris was instrumental in making that possible. He was one of the big pushers in that group that fought for that. So Chris, if you would talk about why you think GMOs are dangerous, and if you could also give us an overview of the fight that we've had in this valley against big ag and the biotech world, and what that's been like.
Yeah, so first off, there are 10 other counties across the United States, regions that have banned genetically engineered crops. Several down in California: Marin County, Mendocino, Trinity County, Humboldt County, Santa Cruz, and then our two here in Oregon, Jackson County and Josephine County. Josephine County being our neighbor county that make up the Rogue Valley, Jackson and Josephine County, and then San Juan Islands up in Washington State.
Nice.
And others are working towards this. So what the challenges, you were asking, what are the challenges?
Well, what would you tell us a little bit about that fight and what you were up against? I mean, as far as I remember it, they were putting a whole lot of money into propaganda to try and tell everyone, oh, GMOs are great, like, there's no problem here. It's going to make everyone, prices will be lower and we'll feed more people and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm curious about what it was like to try and get through to people and what you faced. I mean, did you come into a lot of people who just didn't think GMOs were a problem?
Well, fortunately, we had a good amount of lead time coming into the final stretch for the vote, which was in May of 2014, where 66% of our citizens voted to support banning genetically engineered crops in the county. But that was a lot of education had to go into that to just make people aware that genetically engineered crops actually do not produce more. They produce at best the same amount, if not less, because there's something called yield drag that over years of using the pesticides, the chemicals, the herbicides and whatnot, that yields actually go down, and the biotech companies have known about this for a long time, but they kind of just glaze right over that and move straight to, but we can do stuff for drought tolerance and for nutrition, and we've got all these, it's like the tool chest, and that's they spent in Jackson and Josephine County, they spent nearly $1 million. It was the most expensive campaign in the history of our counties on any citizens initiative or ballot measure. And so they were talking about like how it could stop organic farmers from growing strawberries or asparagus, because those are GMO, don't you know? And this was like the crap that they were putting out was just like oh my God, you got to be kidding me. But we showed them at the polls. We showed them like that the citizens here in our county will not stand for being contaminated by the next door chemical company. And that's something, a key to remember with our situation here is we had a multinational chemical company, Syngenta. It's a Swiss biotech company who is banned to produce the technology in their own country, producing experiments across our valley with their genetically engineered sugar beets. And so we were just like, this really doesn't work for us all to be here, to get along, to coexist, because that's what the Farm Bureau is like 100% behind Monsanto and the other biotech corporations. As a matter of fact, Farm Bureau chapters from all across the U.S. came forward to give tens of thousands of dollars towards the campaign to stop the citizens' effort.
To avoid a precedent, I guess. Yeah.
And this was mostly like 97% of the money that came in to defeat the ballot measure was from out of state, from from again Switzerland, and multinational chemical companies from all over the place, farm bureaus from all different states, big sugar companies, corporations, massive corporations giving all this money, and we saw that in the GMO labeling effort as well.
Yeah.
That they
That's who cares.
they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars to date to stop efforts so that people don't know what they're eating.
And they're spending all that money so that people don't realize that they're eating something that studies have proven is real dangerous for the health of people.
And to be clear, genetically engineered crops use more pesticides, not less pesticides, and they know that because the USDA and the University of Washington scientists have all studied this for over a 15-year period and have found that actual herbicide use and pesticide use are going up. They are increasing, not decreasing, again, because Mother Nature tends to outsmart humans. And so we have all these weed outbreaks to where, you now have weeds in your field that you can spray and spray and spray and can't kill them. And then you bring your combine through the field and, Palmer amaranth about 15 feet tall and a stalk like that virtually break the farm equipment.
Break the equipment because it's so tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about permaculture. How would you describe permaculture to someone who isn't familiar with the concept?
So permaculture is basically a toolbox that allows an individual to utilize ancient knowledge, ancient technology, to be able to use what you have on hand, locally available, to be able to perform your basic living functions without compromising the future's capacity to maintain its forward momentum.
Right. And that seems like a big part of it, because permaculture could be contrasted to conventional agriculture, which extracts big yields at the cost of the land's long-term capacity to produce, and eventually civilized agriculture systems destroy the land and desertify the land. And permaculture is an approach that tries to be more in balance with nature, more imitative of how nature fertilizes the fields and the forests that are very productive in the natural systems. I found that major political, economic, and legal barriers exist to make the implementation of large-scale permaculture real difficult, if not impossible. So would you agree that that's so, and what do you think we can do about that?
So the systems that are set up currently are not set up for sustainability. They are typically set up for profit, and to ensure that everyone gets their share of the economic piece out of that. So it's important that we challenge these systems at every layer and every step of every step of the process needs to be challenged. And so when a county says, well, that's against county code, we have to be willing to sit down at the table to have these discussions. These discussions, when we are told that discussion's over, again, it's against code, then we can take these matters into our own hands, so to speak. I personally feel, and we must do what we feel is within the realm of acceptability within our society, within that community, within that bioregion, that makes sense ecologically and culturally, and implement those. And honestly, I feel that we can have the response, the county's response, the local government's response. We can answer to that at some later point in time. And I'm not suggesting that we be irresponsible. I'm simply suggesting that we diligently open up the channels to have these conversations, and we push the envelope on our projects, on our land, on our our 10-year connection with land, to ensure the government is actually changing with the culture and the rise of the awareness that we have right now, that so many people understand that there are so many deep flaws in how government is set up to that are keeping us from getting to true sustainability.
They're in the way of it in a lot of ways, and it perhaps isn't always intentionally. It's not like they're trying to make farmers have a harder time, but they're definitely caught in an economic paradigm that really makes it hard. And what you're talking about reminds me of the concept of agorism, which basically states that people do what they got to do, and as long as you're doing no harm to anyone, you're justified in breaking laws that are in the way of progress or peace or anything like that. And some examples of that would be like when the government tells you that you can't sell raw milk. Well, some people want raw milk, and some people claim it's much healthier. And so if you're selling raw milk, even though it's against the law, so what? That's how you fight the system. You don't fight it by holding up. I mean, not to say there's anything wrong with protesting, but you're not going to make a whole lot of changes by going out and petitioning the government to change. It's more like you just do what you have to do, and if the momentum of the people is strong enough, the governments have to yield and have to change their policy to fit with what the people are already doing.
That's right.
It's tricky though, because there's a lot of challenges to all of this, which leads me to my next question. A lot of my listeners identify as voluntarists, which states that we believe all interaction should be voluntary, and the initiation of force is unacceptable even under the color of law. And so, you're growing some plants that the government might say is illegal. They come in here and threaten you with violence, and we think that's wrong. We think they're the criminals. But obviously, it's going to take time before that becomes more of a known thing. So what are your thoughts on the legitimacy of institutions like government that force their will on people, force their mandates, and back their authority with violence?
Well, I guess look around us and turn on the news for about 2 minutes, and what do you see? You see typically a lot of violence, and it's violence in how people treat each other just in talking. It's violent. And of course everything all the way down to the worst crimes that humanity knows. So there's no question that our world is filled with violence, but I really feel like we need to speak from our hearts and really come from a place that is from some place that cares deeply about the land, and cares about others in our community around us. Because if we don't do that, then we don't really have a leg to stand on when we're trying to craft a new way forward to towards another vision, another value system. And another value system, I mean, let's face it, it's the value system current in America, for sure, is a lot about me, and it's just really heavily focused on that. So I think what we're realizing is that all that focus and emphasis is really taking away the understanding that we are all connected, and that if I do something that benefits me and destroys my neighbor's water supply, that even though it's legit, it's legal, this is actually not just a disservice to my neighbor, it's a disservice to the bigger whole. Because when one sets down that path and gets away with it, and it's totally, let's say, legitimized in the eyes of everyone else who happens to hear this news story on the television, because it's such a major deal, because this guy, the neighbor, the water supply is now wrecked, ruined, is pretty big news. But it's legit because the guy who did it didn't break any laws by doing it. just as one example. And then this neighbor and this other neighbor and this other neighbor are all now legitimized in doing the same thing
Right.
over and over again. And this guy that did that to the other farmer may have actually made a lot of money in the process. And so, you know, we live in a society that economics are kind of that's calls the shots.
Yeah. And the incentives are backwards in a little bit.
Incentives, yeah. So, you know, the ecology would hurt at the expense of, you know, that's the expense is the destruction of the ecology, whereas somebody is able to put money into their pocket. So it is definitely backwards. So
Yeah.
we definitely need to have these conversations, not first and foremost starting in our community, starting with our neighbors, starting with those that are close to us and that we know, and even those we don't know. If we see something, we know that it's the guy down the river here, but I've never talked to that person. It would be again, it comes back around. Eventually it will come back around, and that's why we need to have the conversation with this person down the road, that we're having a challenge right now on our land and we're trying to figure it out. And we want to bring them into it, because maybe considering their resources are going to be tainted, possibly ruined, can have something creative to add into the story. Maybe they're willing to come out and pull the weeds along your riverbank because they don't want to see the herbicide come down that is part of their drinking water, utilized on your property, which comes right down to the creek.
Right.
And so this person is like, you know, heck, I'd be willing to put in, if you put in 50% of the time, which is still going to save you more time than coming out with a backpack sprayer and spraying the herbicide, I'll gladly chip in 50%. You chip in, you know, you give 2 hours, I'll give 2 hours.
Right.
Let's pull it out, let's bust it out.
Yeah.
And it builds bridges, it builds relationship, it builds understanding.
Yeah, building understanding, building relationship, those are, I think, key factors in changing our society, because I feel like a lot of the problems we face are because of misunderstanding, lack of communication, and lack of relationship amongst people. Neighbors don't know each other. And so I guess you're kind of already getting to my next question, which has to do with what do we do about it? Because I mean, I think a lot of people agree that we're facing major problems in the world, environmentally and societally, and what are some basic steps people can realistically take to make positive changes in their lives? And I think you've said a little bit already on that, with just going and talking to your neighbors and finding out what the problems are and figuring out if there's other ways to solve them other than just by spraying the poison that's going to poison the water. Is there any other way? So yeah, do you advocate, or do you have any sense of what else just ordinary people who have their jobs and who, you know, live in their lives, what can ordinary people do to try and tackle some of these problems?
Well, you know, the primary, like the biggest thing that our culture faces right now are the addiction to convenience. So
Big
like
time.
everything in our society is built on and adapted to that model of, I want to go do something better with my time than to say, to come back to the weed example, than to pull weeds. So instead, I go make this one-time purchase of a backpack sprayer. Of course, we're told it's a one-time purchase, or we're thinking, but really it's a piece of junk from China that might break. You know, that's a bit of a different discussion, but you know, we're taught that the backpack sprayer and the herbicide are going to kill the weeds, and that we're going to then be able to, and it's going to happen quick. That we can then take the time that we've saved and go to the mountains hiking or camping, or go hang out with friends, or all of a sudden we just, instead of taking 2 hours to pull those weeds, we just sprayed those weeds in 30 minutes. And we now just like all of a sudden have an hour and a half of our day that just came from somewhere, and it's like, right, And then you add that on to, you know, permaculture, common one is like fossil fuel. Well, where does fossil fuel come from? Fossil fuel comes from fighting wars in the Middle East. It comes from fracking. It comes from like destruction of and contamination of aquifers and pollution into our Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico and other places around the world where we extract and source this oil and petroleum. And so these fossil fuels are kind of like this facade of convenience. Because when I can jump in my tractor, not just, as permaculture likes to say, use the oil now and use it wisely, and build the systems to be not dependent upon fossil fuels in the future.
Like building big irrigation works that run from gravity. You know, use a machine to do that. It'll go much faster. While we've got them, use them. But set up systems that in the long term, that's a big part of it.
Set up the earthworks so that we actually have the water catchment systems available. Set up the perennial food, forest, and agroecology systems that allow us to actually start to build biomass. So yes, you have the earthworks in there and you're starting to build the fertility, and all of a sudden your water holding capacity, your nutrient holding capacity are less. So you don't have to have tractors constantly in there growing annuals. So like you have a food forest that just produces its own food without, what did I do? I didn't even have to put the weed whacker in there and mow it. Maybe you put your sheep in there.
Some sheep and goats, right?
Sheep and goats, and
let them do it.
And some waterfowl in there, some chickens or some ducks running along cleaning things up for you. And you know, there is a way, and we can design these systems that will benefit and support our farming systems, our food systems, our local food system that are not fossil fuel intensive. So I feel like that is like the quintessence of the question of how do we disengage ourselves from all these so-called conveniences that are the time savers that are actually the root of the problem when it comes to the degradation and the of our environment and the health and welfare, the health of our people.
Right. So there is a better way. It sometimes is a little less convenient, but in the long term, it's going to work better for us. And I feel like that's in essence, that's a big part of what permaculture is. It's looking to the long term and making sure that we can persist on this planet and not kill ourselves off just because we want to get there faster today. Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for talking with me, Chris. And we're going to have continued conversation and maybe go take a look over here at the seed garden you're growing over here. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next time.